All right, looks like we are recording now. Welcome everybody to the Apprenticeship Forum. And today is Thursday, January 20th, 2022. Just like to open it up for some remarks from my co-chair, Senator Slapp.
No, thanks, Representative Elliott. Good to see everybody. Some of you I haven't seen since before the holidays, so happy holidays, and good to start off this new year on a very important topic. So ready to get going. Anybody else have any opening comments or thoughts?
Senator Witkos.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. I just wanted to say I'm very interested in hearing the presentation today. I know that apprenticeship and ratios is something that we've been dealing with in the General Law Committee for quite some time and haven't been able to get some traction. In fact, the governor put in a bill a couple of years ago. We had huge bipartisan support, but we couldn't get it across the finish line. So looking forward to hearing today's discussion.
Great, thank you, Senator. And Representative Haynes, Ranking Member Haynes.
Hi, everybody. Again, Happy New Year to everybody. Let's get started.
All right, let's go ahead and we'll start with our first speaker, Melissa Johnson. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm sharing my screen, correct?
I don't see it yet. Jeannie, does
Okay.
Melissa have sharing privileges?
Yes, she does.
Okay, there we go.
Does everybody see their presentation here, the slides? Cool, great. So first of all, thank you all for having me. My name is Melissa Johnson, as you just said. I'm the Managing Director of State Strategies and National Skills Coalition. And for those of you all who are not familiar with National Skills Coalition, we are, as our name implies, a coalition of training providers, of community colleges, of business leaders, workforce development agencies, workers themselves, anyone interested in fighting for a commitment across states and across the federal government to high quality skills training and work supports. And I'd like to, for this forum, cover a few different topics. Let's see if my slides are advancing here. Here we go. 4 topics over the next few minutes. So I want to begin with the backdrop of talking about the diversity of Connecticut's workforce as a way to talk about the importance of implementing equitable apprenticeship pipeline policies to that diverse workforce. And want to cover some state policy examples of how apprenticeship can advance equity, and then spend some time on federal funding opportunities. So as you all know, diversity in Connecticut is growing. This chart comes from our friends at PolicyLink and their National Equity Atlas database, and it shows how racial and ethnic diversity in Connecticut is growing and continues to grow. And that's not to mention gender in the workforce and other forms of diversity, people with disabilities, as I know will be talked about today. Yet we know that disparities are holding Connecticut's economy back, they're holding our nation's economy back, and not just racial disparities, but all forms of disparity. This chart hones in on educational attainment, and specifically for people whose highest level of education is a high school diploma. And as you can see on this chart, people of color are overrepresented in this particular group. And if this chart, of course, was about income, we'd see similar disparities. Work-based learning and apprenticeship are a key part of addressing those disparities, which is why I'm glad that you all are having this forum today. It, as you all know, is an on-ramp that provides a paying job from the start, which is very important for addressing disparities. It can lead to long-term positive employment outcomes, and it's proven successful at improving wages and retention outcomes. At the same time, it's very important to expand access to apprenticeship in an equitable way. We know that women, people with disabilities have been historically underrepresented in apprenticeship. And if we look at the national data, we know that Black apprentices have been shown to earn the lowest exit wage of all apprentices. So here's where I want to transition to talking about 3 states, just to lift up 3 different themes that I think are important to keep in mind to implement equitable apprenticeship policies. And I want to begin here with Oregon. So Oregon, I'm highlighting here to highlight the importance of investing in sector partnerships that align resources across departments and across functions to prepare people for apprenticeship. And my understanding is that Connecticut has recently invested in this area. So we might be learning more about that today as well. But sector partnerships are so important because of what they do, and what Oregon has done through this example is that they are aligning across higher ed, their business partners, their workforce systems, labor, and that has allowed them to recruit students for specific sector partnerships. And specifically with this example, they are able to recruit students who are receiving public assistance to prepare them for apprenticeship programs with their business partners. And they're able to work with SNAP ENT, which is a very viable federal funding source to provide books, tools, and equipment, once again, to expand access to apprenticeship. Then Maryland. I highlight Maryland here as an example of the importance of investing in pre-apprenticeship programs. And pre-apprenticeship serves as an on-ramp to apprenticeship. Programs can last from 2 to 3 months, during which participants can learn basic industry and math skills, can prepare them for apprenticeship, get familiar with tools and machinery if that's applicable, and receive coaching. And supporting these particular programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, is really crucial as they provide access to apprenticeship for underrepresented groups, like women, like people of color. It helps to broaden that apprenticeship pipeline. And Maryland is doing that through its Project Jumpstart. And then finally, highlight Mississippi to recognize the importance of childcare in getting more women into apprenticeship programs. In Mississippi, the state directed federal funds to one pre-apprenticeship program for women in construction, specifically to provide childcare for the time that they were in the pre-apprenticeship program, as well as up to a year for after they graduated from the apprenticeship program, as they transitioned to an apprenticeship program, a formal apprenticeship program with an employer. And this particular program, the More Community House Women in Construction program that the state directed federal funds towards, they were able to triple their enrollment of women between 2016 and 2020, specifically because that childcare burden was taken care of. And that was one less thing for the participants to think about. So we have the themes. I'm sure you all are wondering, like, how do we pay for this? There are many different federal funding streams that can be tapped, and I'm going to highlight just 2 here, but this is definitely not an exhaustive list. First, the American Rescue Plan just was passed last year, provided billions of dollars, and states have used, including Connecticut, have used these dollars to direct them to the workforce system and to policies that support apprenticeship. And I believe you all are already directing some of these funds towards sector-based training and expanding hours at technical high schools, which is great. It's a great step in the right direction. I highlight 2 additional examples here of states that are also directing these funds towards apprenticeship and supportive policies. So first, Illinois is directing some of its ARPA funds toward a barrier reduction fund for trainees. And this reduction fund helps to cover emergency expenses for trainees. And that can be anything from a car repair to equipment to anything they need that helps them to complete that program. And though this barrier reduction fund is attached to a specific training program, in other states, we have seen states advocate for work-based learning supportive programs. So you could have an apprenticeship program that supportive services fund that's specifically targeted to apprenticeship. North Carolina is also investing some of its ARPA funds into work-based learning programs as well at their community colleges. Then, of course, the Build Back Better Act. I put this here as a sign of even more funds that are anticipated and the importance of being ready for those increased investments between the funds that have been already received and funds that could come through any kind of Build Back Better related package. We could be looking at a historic level investment for the workforce system. And it's important to not only spend the dollars that have already been allocated in an equitable way, but to be ready for an historic level of investment, possibly between the funding sources, the highest level of investment since the Great Depression in the workforce system. And that's something that we are keenly focused on. And then before I wrap, I want to make sure I leave you all with another resource to inform that your readiness and your decisions as a committee. We have a network of 20 affiliated state coalitions. And our state coalitions are, of course, focused on state policy, including one in Connecticut. And our partners in Connecticut to head that coalition are the United Way of Connecticut and Capital Workforce Partners. So feel free to reach out to us. And my information is here on the last slide, but feel free to use them as a resource as well. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. We are going to be doing questions and answers at the end. So I'd like to keep us moving along. Next, we have Todd Burch. Go right ahead if you're ready.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay and see me all right?
Yes to both.
Very great. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Todd Burch. I'm the State Apprenticeship Director, State of Connecticut. And on behalf of the commissioners and the staff of the Office of Apprenticeship Training, we thank you, the chairs and the ranking and committee members of the Higher Education and Employer Advancement Committee for inviting us today to this fantastic forum with some great speakers. We'd also take liberty to thank CTN for covering this, as CTN also is an apprenticeship employer partner of ours. And we've been asked what is the role of Office of Apprenticeship with regard to workforce development in the state of Connecticut. As many know, apprenticeship is an employer post-hire onboarding and skill development program administered by our office. As many employers hire for attitude, the employer's apprenticeship program trains for aptitude, AKA the bridge to professional practice. Post-secondary occupational education courses available at many public and private institutions teach the theoretical aspects of an occupation. Therefore, an individual obtains a theoretical concept of that occupation. An employer's apprenticeship program is vital as it brings the individual from academia to practicum, mentored in their occupation in various tasks, and that an apprentice must become proficient in over a determined amount of time by the employer to become masters of that occupation. By crossing this bridge from concept to the way an employer wishes to have their employee perform that particular task is the essence of what apprenticeship is. Basically, an apprenticeship is an employer's voluntary program which assists in many, many different things. It can assist in recruitment of new employees, the training of such, which also there's been lots of conversation regarding skill transfer. A lot of folks say that we have a silver tsunami coming, which that's absolutely true by statistics. How do we transfer those skills from these seasoned individuals that are proficient in their occupation? Apprenticeship is a solution, again, on a voluntary basis for employers. It also helps with retention. It has also been stated by many employees that if I have room to grow through a career ladder, I will be absolutely more available and more amenable to become retained by the organization that I'm employed by. Therefore, registered apprenticeship is a HR department, so to speak, in a box. It's great for retention, it's great for training, it's great for recruitment, but it's a really good succession plan. Absolutely great succession plan. These apprenticeship programs in construction and manufacturing have been around for decades. The registered apprenticeship system systemically throughout the United States has branched out into healthcare, into IT, and various other occupations, as it's been a really interesting model. They call it the original four-year degree, someone has to become proficient, just like in the academic sphere, with their occupation. So that, with that being said, that is our role, and I'm very interested, from our aspect of hearing, and the speaker before me was very appropriate in stating that we are moving the needle on diversity with regard to workforce development with our partners. And I leave it for the other questions at the end, and I'm looking forward to the other presenters. Thank you.
Todd, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Next, we'll move on to Dan Kuhn from the Urban Institute. Go right ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I also have slides that I'll be sharing. All right, everybody see them?
Sure do.
Great. So good morning. I want to thank Senator Slapp and Representative Elliott for inviting me to participate in this forum on apprenticeship and expanding access to good jobs. My name is Daniel Kuhn, and I'm a principal research associate at the Urban Institute, where my research focuses on registered apprenticeship and workforce development. The Urban Institute is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization based out of Washington, D.C. Our work is designed to connect strong research with actionable policies on the ground that can help improve the quality of life in communities throughout the country. The presentation I'm giving today should not be construed as representing the views of the Urban Institute as a whole, which doesn't take positions on issues. Today, I'm going to be sharing what my colleagues and I have learned about registered apprenticeship programs that are inclusive of people with disabilities. I'll be discussing findings from a report for the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy that I co-authored with my colleagues John Murata, Bhavani Arabandi, and Basha Katz. I'll discuss the recent expansion of protections for apprentices with disabilities, the characteristics of apprentices with disabilities, what we know based on the data, and strategies for supporting employers who sponsor inclusive apprenticeship programs. Equal employment regulations for apprentices were originally published in 1978 and prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, and sex. These original protected categories were not expanded until 2016, when new regulations added protections for discrimination on the basis of disability, age, sexual orientation, and genetic information. So a lot of what we know about apprentices with disability has only come since the expansion of the 2016 regulation. As a part of sponsors' obligation not to discriminate on the basis of disability, all registered apprenticeship program sponsors must provide reasonable accommodations upon request to applicants and apprentices with disabilities to allow them to perform critical job functions. And this is consistent with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Sponsors with more than 5 apprentices are also required to invite apprentices and applicants to voluntarily self-identify whether they have a disability. Self-reported disability status is reported in the federal administrative data on registered apprentices for the states that use the federal administrative data system. So our current knowledge of the number of apprentices who self-identify as having a disability and their characteristics and their experiences in the apprenticeship program come from those reports to the federal government. The Office of Apprenticeship also has an aspirational goal of 7% of registered apprentices identifying as having a disability. And the reason for that aspirational goal is that that matches the US workforce as a whole, the share of workers who identify as having a disability. Our report used data on individual registered apprentices through 2019 in the 35 states that report that data to the federal government. Connecticut is actually a state apprenticeship agency, an SAA state. Some of them report individual apprentice data to the federal government. Connecticut does not. So unfortunately, the data I'm presenting represent a lot of the country, but don't represent Connecticut directly. Across the 35 states that report individual level data to the federal government, only 1,900 apprentices identified as having a disability in 2019. Almost all of the remaining apprentices in 2019 had no information on their disability status reported at all, and only 580 apprentices affirmatively reported that they do not have a disability. This puts us in a really tough position where we think the data indicate that few apprentices with disabilities are accessing registered apprenticeship programs, but we also suspect that there's substantial underreporting of the apprentices with disability that are registered in programs. If the 7% aspirational goal that the Office of Apprenticeship has were achieved in 2019 for these states that report to the federal government, over 33,700 apprentices would identify as having a disability in the administrative data rather than 1,900. So even given data limitations, we think that apprentices with disabilities are under accessing registered apprenticeship. Now, although we think apprentices with disability may be undercounted in the administrative data, the data that are available do help us to understand the characteristics of workers. We know that more apprentices who identify as having a disability are women than those who don't identify that way. So 12.3% of apprentices with disability are women. More apprentices who identify as having a disability are white or Latinx than those who don't, and fewer are Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders. But we actually didn't see a big difference in the share of apprentices with disabilities who are Black, Asian, or American Indian or Alaska Natives. One important finding is that over a third of apprentices identifying as having a disability are veterans, compared to 9.9% of the apprentices that don't identify that way. So the veteran population is very important for apprentices with disabilities, and services that support veteran apprentices are also often supporting apprentices with disabilities. Apprentices identifying as having a disability are employed in the same occupations as apprentices that do not, for the most part, but they are more likely to be employed in information technology apprenticeship programs than those who do not, although most of them are employed in construction, just like apprentices in general. We also know that apprentices with disability are successful in their training. Apprentices who identify as having a disability have higher completion rates and lower cancellation rates than those who don't identify as having a disability. And they actually have a higher starting wage, a somewhat higher starting wage than those who don't identify as having a disability. And a lot of this has to do with what occupations they're employed in. Next, I'm going to talk about the benefits and costs of apprenticeship for employers and apprentices. I'm not going to say much about apprentices themselves because research shows, we've known for a long time, that apprentices' lifetime earnings are significantly improved by participation in an apprenticeship program. That's why everybody's interested in expanding apprenticeship. It's only been more recently that we found out about the benefits and costs of apprenticeship for employers, but this is really critical because an employer is required for every apprenticeship program. You can't have an apprenticeship program without the participation of employer. The research shows in the last couple of years that apprenticeship also benefits employers. Sue Helper did a study for the Commerce Department, found a 40% return for the employer for a medical assistant apprenticeship program and a 50% rate of return for a manufacturing apprenticeship program. Payne also finds a range of positive returns for employers of industrial manufacturing technicians. He looks at a number of those programs ranging from 26 to 72%. And the Urban Institute is currently working on an employer ROI study right now for the Department of Labor that shows similar findings. Okay. So this research covers all apprenticeship programs, but our report also helps to think about the costs and benefits of an apprenticeship program inclusive of people with disabilities. Employers and apprenticeship intermediaries report that the benefits of an inclusive apprenticeship include a strengthened talent pipeline and access to new talent, as well as improved retention in the apprenticeship program. And that's consistent with the data I reported earlier on the higher completion rates for apprentices with disabilities. The only real difference in the costs of an inclusive apprenticeship are any costs associated with accommodations for the apprentices with disabilities, which of course are going to vary depending on individual apprentices' needs and an employer's prior investment in the program. An inclusive apprenticeship program is one that invests in all accommodations required for apprentices to perform at a level required by the employer. Some costs of accommodations may be higher than others, but one thing our interview experts pointed out was that many employers overestimate what the cost of accommodations are and the additional costs of operating an inclusive apprenticeship program. One staff member of a state government agency reported that employers frequently overestimate accommodation costs and are therefore less willing to develop or be interested in developing an inclusive apprenticeship program. When necessary accommodations are relatively more costly, and sometimes that's the case, interviewees highlighted the importance of state and federal financial support. Several interviewees mentioned that state vocational rehabilitation agencies had resources to support accommodations to apprentices receiving VR services. And an intermediary organization we talked to described how an on-site job coach that support apprentices with disabilities was paid for by a U.S. Department of Labor grant program. So there are these other funding opportunities to consider. Our interviewees also suggested that employers need training and technical assistance to support inclusive apprenticeship program. Research on the Wisconsin Youth Apprenticeship Program found that employers lack the knowledge and preparation to provide accommodations for apprentices with disabilities, and the accommodations were inadequate as a result because it was kind of an ad hoc effort. In contrast, experience with the work-based learning program Project Search shows that planning for support and regular coordination with VR counselors improved outcome for apprentices. So Project Search isn't actually a registered apprenticeship program, but it's a work-based learning program combining classroom study and work-based learning. So it's very similar. Let's see. Our interviewees also suggested that employers need training. So I'm sorry. So next I want to talk about pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship and how that improves access for apprentices with disabilities. States have invested in pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship programs that are inclusive of people with disabilities. Youth apprenticeship is particularly critical strategy for expanding registered apprenticeship today because it smooths the transition from school to work for students. So you don't have this gap after graduation from high school. Youth apprenticeship programs are also really great for incorporating students with disabilities that have existing individualized education plans and incorporating the work-based learning into those IEPs while they're still in high school and have a lot of the support of high schools. So Texas has been experimenting with youth apprenticeship programs that are targeted to youth with disabilities, and their Explore Apprenticeship program that exposes high school students to apprenticeship training at community colleges. Pennsylvania has also developed a pre-apprenticeship program in warehousing that works with their VR agency. And then since the publication of our report, Ohio and a number of other states have started similar initiatives for youth apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. All right, so I want to conclude by talking about what state apprenticeship agencies can do to support inclusive apprenticeship, and this really reviews a lot of what I've already said. They can support employer efforts to let apprentices self-identify as having a disability, give them technical assistance on collecting this information, and then tracking the data and using the data. They can provide employers with technical assistance and funding support to make their apprenticeship programs inclusive of apprentices with disabilities. they're involved in registering programs and developing apprenticeship standards. And so they can encourage during the registration process programs that are inclusive of apprentices with disabilities. And finally, build relationships with the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services and the Connecticut Department of Aging and Disability Services. So thank you for inviting me today, and I'm happy to take any questions when it's time.
Thank you so much, Dan. We're actually going to move on to our next speaker, and then that will be our last speaker, and we'll move on to questions then. So next, I would like to move on to Ariane Higlish, and go right ahead if you are ready. Ariane, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Apologies for that. So my name is Ariane Higlish. I'm a senior research fellow at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. We are a think tank in Washington, D.C., focused on building evidence to shape policies that grow women's power, influence, and close inequality gaps. And this is why we are focusing on improving access to the apprenticeships in the trades, which, this does not, can you do, somehow this does not move. Let me see. Yeah, it is. Okay. So on apprenticeships in the building trades. And so what I thought I would do is to talk about, why focus on this now, a little bit of background of who the women apprentices are who already work in the trades to hit some myth, but then to focus on what the challenges are in diversifying trades apprenticeships and examples from some states who have made a lot of progress in tackling these challenges. So why now? There is a clear need coming out of COVID-19. We know that women were concentrated in lowest paid jobs. Many of these jobs have not come back yet or may not come back. Many of them require some college and some qualification, but had much lower earnings. So opening opportunities to better paid careers is a real priority at the moment. And of course, in terms of building trades apprenticeships, they are about 2/3 of all apprenticeships at the moment. They have typically high starting wages, around $15 an hour with benefits, and hence present good opportunities for women to build economic security. Oops, sorry. Why now is also because at this stage, there's the highest number of women working in trade occupation ever, including women apprentices. There is a high growth in women's numbers across racial and ethnic backgrounds in apprenticeships since the federal effort really took off to promote apprenticeships. And of course, there's an urgent need to replenish the skilled workforce in construction-related trades as workers reach retirement, particularly because through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a lot of additional demand will be generated. The challenge is that the construction workforce and the apprenticeship workforce does not in any way reflect the population as it is at the moment, either by gender or by race. And women are around 1 in 20 of apprentices, if that, in the trades. The new money, the federal money that's expected, is coming with high expectations, including a goal of women being 23% of apprentices in the trades and in other programs. And the last one is the issue of retention and completion. Many in apprenticeship programs in construction do not complete them, women more than men, but it means it's a high level of investment, that is potentially lost, and supports are needed to improve retention. So quickly, our data source, we very recently completed a large survey of tradeswomen, which focuses on retention and advancement and includes over 600 women doing trades apprenticeships. And we have results from all states, including Connecticut. Unfortunately, not enough to do statistically kind of reliable, data specifically for Connecticut. Oops. This is very invisible. So just as I said, I wanted to just start briefly by saying what we know from our survey about who women are who are working in trades apprenticeships. One of the issues to highlight is that many are mothers and parents, and we highlight that because we, as well as I think other stakeholders, were positively surprised by that, because typically the very first response when we're saying, okay, why are there not more women in your very well-paid programs, is, oh yeah, they have kids, they don't want this. Clearly, childcare is not easy in the trades. It's not easy in any occupations, but the women who are there now are as likely to have kids as other women of their age. It's also a very diverse workforce. It's more diverse than the general female workforce. It means, because these are good jobs that you can get without college, and hence they're attractive. And the good jobs part is here at the bottom of our sample. Over 30% earned over 50,000 a year. These are apprentices, and slightly under our half earned between 25 and 50,000 while they were pursuing an apprenticeship and a industry recognized qualification. So how can we grow the number of women apprentices in these occupations? What are the challenges? Again, drawing on our survey, the first one is get the word out. Finding out about the trades is haphazard. The majority, or almost the majority, came into the trades through friends and family. So if you're born that way, you can get in. If not, tough luck. Only 6% of apprentices, that means, you know, people who have left school fairly recently, learned about opportunities in the trades from their high school counselor. I put in 12% in Massachusetts because they've had a long-standing program to improve that. And indeed, because schools still focus very much on college, quite a few women apprentices find apprenticeships after they've completed college and find that they really cannot make ends meet. The next challenge is creating welcoming work sites, particularly one where isolation is not as common. These are traditionally male occupations where women are often few and far between. And 37% of the women we interviewed said that they are frequently or always held to a higher standard than men. That can be exhausting. And then there's also quite a lot of evidence of discrimination at the heart of the apprenticeship program, particularly in access to on-the-job training and to work assignments, which are key in allowing people to develop a rounded set of skills and then support themselves once they complete the apprenticeships. So, as I already said, retention is an issue. And in our sample, 44% of women apprentices said they had seriously thought about leaving the trades. Why? What are the reasons for this? You know, as I already mentioned, lack of respect, yelling culture, inequality in access to good training, difficulties finding stable work, lack of promotion opportunities, and, you know, the one at the bottom, lack of pregnancy accommodation, all issues, problems that should be easily fixed by decent workplaces and decent human resource and supervisory policies. So, you know, I guess it's the good news. This is not an inevitable problem. Difficulties with finding childcare is mentioned by a third of those respondents. And I guess that's an issue that more generally at the moment haunts us, and hopefully we will be able to make some improvements in terms of access to childcare going forward. So for the last few minutes, I want to focus on 2 states which have made a lot of progress in tackling the inequality in access to good apprenticeships. The first one just to the north is Massachusetts. As you can see here, over the last decade, the number of women apprentices increased in union apprenticeships, which form the bulk of apprenticeships in the trades in Massachusetts, increased from just under 5% to over 10%. Very rapid progress, and as I said, nationally we are still around between 4 and 5%, so way above the norm. And while there was also some improvement in the private sector apprenticeships, it was not as marked. And the way they have achieved this is by a very conscious focus on addressing both the supply, that is the training, the attraction of women to trade jobs, and the demand, that is to ensure that there are jobs for them when they come out of apprenticeship and during apprenticeship. I've put references to where you can find out more about them into the back. But this is convened by something called the Policy Group on Tradeswomen's Issues, which brings together stakeholders, including developers, apprenticeship owners, as well as unions and advocacy groups, very hands-on, trying to make change. They say ambitious targets is what gets it going, but also very focused on having disaggregated data to identify problems early. They focus on the largest projects, not least because then you can create cohorts of women and ensure that you don't get isolations. In their biggest project, casino building in the west of Massachusetts, they had 500 women working on the project. They have a pre-apprenticeship program, Boston Building Pathways, which actually is co-ed, but has about 50% women. And it was co-founded by the now US Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh. And they reach out to high schools, but also they get out the word to women. So all large building sites, for example, have a photo of women working in the trades with access to information on how you can get in, to make sure that women know that this is something for them. The second state I want to highlight, Oregon again. We already had Oregon. Oregon has adopted slightly different again over the last 10 years. They have identified a targeted source of funding and have given the state passed a law to draw down 0.5% of federal highway funds that is available to states to fund diversity efforts. And since then, Oregon Department of Training and Department of Labor have jointly worked to increase retention, access, and diversity in the trades. Women's numbers in all trade apprenticeship beyond the highways one has gone up from 6% to 9% over the since 2019. It's gone up more since then, and in the highway trades from 9 to 12%. And you can see also here on the right is a chart on the completion rates and the share of completers who are women and men of minority backgrounds. How they have done this funds a bunch of stuff. I mean, perhaps key here is in terms of facilitating change is Oregon tradeswomen who have been going for 20 years or so, but who have, play a role. Also, they provide pre-apprenticeship training, but they also do, you know, career fairs for middle schoolers, for adult women. The program provides supportive services to all apprentices. So it's childcare help, help with transportation. Actually, more white men get help with childcare than black men or black and white and women of color, because they're just so much more in apprenticeships. But it has a dramatic effect on retention. And it also includes job site mentoring and retention services, including line management development. So having this dedicated source of funding has really pushed them forward. Also from Oregon, the Greater Portland Metro has reviewed all publicly funded projects that are in the pipeline, used that to estimate over the next decade how many skilled workers they need, and then have set targets for women's hours in the apprenticeship, for apprenticeship on those public projects, and women of color, the hours they work, and now setting up the supports to ensure that skilled workers are there to deliver those projects. And last not least, Safe from Hate, an initiative to improve job site culture, which brings together contractors and other stakeholders to provide hands-on support and commitment to improve the working environment. And again, both for attraction and retention of workers that are really needed to respond to demand. So in conclusion, change is really necessary in who has access to building trades apprenticeships, both because of shortages, the skill shortages. You cannot meet them just by relying on half of the population, but also because federal diversity goals and an emphasis on meeting those goals that are likely to come with infrastructure spending. Change is possible with intentional policies to build supply and ensure demand. And I should say, you know, we've talked earlier about funding sources. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act does not mandate spending on workforce development, so it doesn't have a 0.5% limit, but it absolutely allows that spending. And we may also get you know, administrative guidance encouraging some of that spending. And then lastly, you know, we can build, there clearly is a momentum, and we can build on that momentum to ensure that women, and particularly women of color, get a fair access to these apprenticeships. Many of them will be supported by public dollars. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariane. I'll jump in. This is Representative Farrar. Representative Elliott had to get in the car, so he asked me to jump in at this point in time. So I just want to thank everyone for their presentations, illuminating these opportunities in front of us to truly diversify this incredible pathway called apprenticeship. And I just welcome my colleagues who have joined. If you want to raise your hands for your questions, and we'll take those if you want to direct them to all of our speakers or a particular one, and just happy to answer any questions that people have from this panel of speakers we put together. Representative Haynes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to all the panelists that have come to bring us some information here. This is great stuff. I am a huge supporter of apprenticeship programs. I guess, and this can be to anybody, I'm just concerned, not concerned, but just have a question in regards to how does these kinds of apprenticeship programs, such as, say, the state-run apprenticeship programs, I don't know whether the word is compete, align themselves with the apprenticeship programs that are done through unions. Our friends at the unions run many apprenticeship programs, and they tout that the union apprenticeship program is by far the best apprenticeship programs out there because of the quality of the training that they get. And then we have a very trained workforce in regards to, particularly in regards to our trades. So I guess what my question is that how do we align the apprenticeship programs other than the union apprenticeship programs for the workforce that we're trying to fill all these gaps? And that's for any of you that have an answer, or please feel free to answer. Yeah.
Through the chairs, I could address that if need to be.
Please go ahead, Todd, to start. Yeah, and anyone else.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon now, Representative. There's not necessarily a bifurcation of the state-run programs. As the previous speakers had stated, all apprenticeship programs are employer-driven programs. They don't necessarily compete with each other. If an employer wants to utilize registered apprenticeship as a workforce development tool, is it at their will and pleasure to do so? So they're all actually equal. They're competing as far as who has better training. It's kind of a liken to like who has the best university. That's the way I look at it, and the way that we take that stance is, are there some places that have better facilities, better training, so on and so forth? That's subject to debate outside of our office. That being said, they are all equally looked upon as the solution for workforce development. There isn't silos. There's not bifurcations. If, again, employer driven, as the speakers had stated earlier, it is the subject of the conversation. So I hope I answered that question for you. Thank you.
And I see Ariane and Melissa had a comment for you too, Representative Haynes. Ariane.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. As Todd said, you know, a registered apprenticeship program, whether it's union or non-union, should have high standards and good training and lead to monitor itself, ensure that there's equity, and lead to recognized qualifications. The reason in our work, you know, the research, at least at the moment, is pretty clear that the union apprenticeship programs have a better record of A, recruiting diverse participants, and B, helping them finish. Unions aren't perfect, but you know, they have recently made a lot of effort to really change who is in the programs and how they're moving ahead. Also, what is really important to us, we are working on this because women need access to economic security and family sustaining wages. And those are much more likely out of union apprenticeship programs. And that is also why we're focusing on non-traditional apprenticeships, because, you know, childcare apprenticeship or in the healthcare sector, you know, they may be good training programs, but they often do not lead to very high wages. So that's our pitch.
And Melissa, did you want to add as well?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that I think alignment, as you said, Representative, is the thing to focus on. And I think all of us talks a bit about broadening the pipeline and the need for more apprentices, period. So both the programs run by your state office and the union programs are needed. It would be interesting to see what industry sectors those programs are in, and whether the state programs are filling a need that the union programs aren't filling, or vice versa. But as Ariane just said, all registered apprenticeship programs have very high standards. So I would just think of that, like you said, the alignment and bringing as many people into the pipeline as possible.
Absolutely, and I think that's what my goal is. Obviously, you know, whichever ways we can get people to work and you know, bring a diverse group of people into that, and reach them in all sections would be great. I actually had a conversation this morning with our new president of our community colleges, and we were talking just about this today and how they can reach out and work in this, spectrum as well in regards to the whole apprenticeship program. So, they're all over the state, and as long as they keep them all open, they will definitely be, a partner in this as well. So I think this is all good, and I just didn't want any limitations to be on any programs out there that are available. So thank you for all your responses. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Representative Haynes. Representative Acker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to, first thank all the presenters. Very interesting. Dan, I want to learn more about your presentation from the Urban Institute. I'll be looking up that. Very informative. I appreciate that. That's what I didn't know a lot about. Obviously diversity in our workforce. I know I'm a just full disclosure. I am a sponsor for Todd Burch knows for the state of Connecticut as an employer. As a matter of fact, I have 33% of my apprentices are female. It's 1 in 3, but it's still good. I think, so female electrical apprentice. I brought her on. She's excited to be in our business. I do have, I'm going to tout, Connecticut has a pre-apprenticeship program that works. Todd knows that. I want to make sure that we know that. We have, by the way, Representative Haynes, over 85% of the trades apprentices are non-union. So we have the non-union workforce is huge in the state of Connecticut. 85%, and as Todd mentioned, they're volunteers that do this, that take these people on. Over 85% are employed by non-union shops, giving that's the largest training force in the state of Connecticut in the construction trades is those that aren't in union. And we have a strong program in the state of Connecticut. Melissa, thank you for the information on the ARPA funds. That's going to be great, I think, coming our way. And also, just so you know, one of the things that you were brought up was the workforce, getting childcare and workforce. Connecticut has a great program called Care for Kids. And what that Care for Kids does is offsets the dollars for working individuals, especially those in apprenticeship fields and in training. So we're doing these things, and we need to pat ourselves on the back for some of those. And so laudable goals that we have to get people into the apprenticeship programs. I want to shout out to Representative Senator Whitcoast. He brought up a big snag that we have in the state of Connecticut. We have what we call a hiring ratio. The oddest thing that you can imagine is a hiring ratio, which means that a company that has dozens of employers that are licensed can only hire a small portion to be apprentices. We have our own logjam that we created, not getting people into the workforce. And that's an issue that I've been trying to deal with, and hopefully we'll take that on again soon. But that's an issue that is keeping people from getting into being an apprentice and then getting hired because they don't see a job for them after their 4 years of training. So we need that. And I found out something else that we're working on is that, we have in the pre-apprenticeship program, me as an employer that wants to hire my son or daughter to be in the pre-apprenticeship program, the schools aren't allowing them to do that. So we have some snags that we need to work on in the state of Connecticut that would open up more jobs without money. It's just changing some language and legislation and in policy and State Department of Education. So I could talk for hours on this. I apologize. It's a great presentation. I got to learn some more, but looking forward to actually learn more and be more involved in helping. But, shout out to Todd Burch and his team. Great group over there, the state apprenticeship program.
Thanks, Representative Acker. Representative Wood.
Thank you, and really good presentation. And like Tim, I'm grateful for Melissa and your perspective on ARPA funds and what we might do with that. And my question is to either Todd or Daniel. One of your slides in the presentation had the statistic about the people who wanted to leave the workforce because one of the reasons listed was yelling in a hostile work environment, which wow, it was a huge number too. It was like 50+%. So I'm just curious why the percentage is so high in so many workplaces are considered hostile. Or was it Ariane?
Yeah, so that is, you know, it's 50% of the 44%, right? So it's about a quarter of the respondents. I think that is a specific construction industry problem that, you know, and it's also a problem of lack of training for supervisors, foremen, leadership, but it's really, you know, and the construction industry has a big recruitment issue because it's not just women who don't want to work under those circumstances. So that is, I don't think it's the same in most other industries. I hope not.
All right, good. That's helpful. And so it's not in manufacturing. So it's really just the construction industry. And as you mentioned that, I do know a young man who is in the construction field, and he just said they treat them very poorly. And I don't know how that can exist today when we have so much more enlightenment on how important it is to treat people well. So I'm disappointed to hear that, but I look forward to being able to help in some way. So thank you. Again, thank you for the presentation.
Todd, did you want to add to that, Todd?
Yes, I'd like to actually add to that. And Ariane, I'd like to see some more data on that as a former construction worker myself. Connecticut also had aligned itself with building pathways. I wrote a grant. It was afforded $200,000 to develop a building pathways program here in the state of Connecticut, which was wildly successful, moved the needle on getting women into construction. No question about it. That being said, I'd very much like to look at your data. With regard to when we got building pathways off the floor, there was very large conversations about the mentors and the employers getting together to say, okay, what are we all doing here? We're all peers here. There is no bifurcation. We're workers. It's not necessarily that there's an individual, so on and so forth. But I like to see the yelling part. As a former construction work, it's a very loud workplace. So I like to actually see what your definition of yelling actually is, if you wouldn't mind. So I just wanted to bring that forward. Thank you.
Can I very quickly answer to that?
Please, Ariane.
To be absolutely honest, I think if somebody says, what's the main reason for you for wanting to leave? And you say, and I say yelling culture, it didn't go beyond that. It's very important. It's not because it's very loud. It's because you're being yelled at. You know, there's a difference between needing volume and, you know, and I think it is partly, I mean, I think it is a trade-off. You know, it's a certain working culture, and you also can't come in and say, okay, we're now all kind of, you know, very quiet and little mice and whatever. But there is a lot of disrespect that we're hearing from people. But the good thing is there are also a lot of work sites that seem to have changed and ensure a better work environment. So it's definitely not everywhere.
If I could follow up on that, please, Representative Farrar.
Yes, please, Todd.
Every single apprenticeship agreement in the state of Connecticut has the affordability for any apprentice to bring forth a complaint to my office through my staff. So we can not necessarily air a grievance, hopefully remediation to a situation in a positive manner through positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement by any means, is more appropriate. Every single apprentice is aware of that. They are giving the complaint process document to inform not only myself as the director, but also my staff how to remediate any issue. And overwhelmingly, issues happen, and overwhelmingly, they are resolved with a positive aspect. So thank you.
Representative Wood, did that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. It helps give a little more perspective. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Representative Turco.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I've been juggling multiple Zoom meetings, which I know a lot of us are doing these days when things get doubled and triple booked. But I wanted to ask a little bit about the quality of different apprenticeships. And if this has been answered, I'm sorry already. You know, I know we have the union shop apprentices and we have the non-union shop apprentices. Can anyone speak to the completion rates of both, so I can get a better idea, which is sort of doing it better, and then how we can replicate that model more throughout the state. Thank you.
Can anyone answer that? Daniel, do you want to jump in first?
So the completion rates nationally are about 45%, and the union program completion rate is higher. I can get that worked up and send that in. I don't know exactly how much higher it is, but overall that's the completion rate.
I think, again, I can send you data from Oregon, which has a mixed union, non-union workforce, but all those data are very influenced by construction, because construction is 2/3 of apprenticeships. And I don't know, this attrition, 44% completing or so, that probably is fairly construction specific. So I don't know for the other major areas of apprenticeship what the completion rate is.
Okay, thank you for providing that information.
All set, Representative Turco?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Representative Exum.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for this presentation. I'm sorry I had to jump on late. I had another meeting as well, but I'm interested in looking at workforce opportunities and creating more workforce opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And I'm wondering what Connecticut does in terms of reporting the amount of apprenticeships for people with disabilities. If you could give me more insight into that, please.
So as I discussed in my presentation, Connecticut isn't one of the states that reports directly to the federal government the data on apprentices, which is a choice that a lot of state agencies make. They report aggregate counts to the federal government, and those aren't easily public available. I've seen them in some cases. So I think Todd is probably better positioned to say what the specific situation is in Connecticut, but they would be required to collect this information and give apprentices the opportunity to self-identify. That's true across all states.
Representative Exum, to answer that question, we have begun our conversations over the last 6 to 8 months working with the federal government to update some data, not specifically to that due to the fact of the restraints of PII. And as the individual from the Urban Institute has also stated, that is self-identified, not necessarily a question I can answer at that time, but we are starting to get some aggregate data, more of an upload to the federal government as opposed to my predecessors, not due to policy by any means, just due to the ask of the federal government of, can you let us have a data sharing agreement? And we're beginning those conversations. We're also having those conversations with various entities and various agencies in the state of Connecticut to identify if we can, in fact, identify that as an aggregate.
I'm just interested too, as we're looking at more workforce opportunities and development, looking at like the Office of Workforce Strategies, if there's a way to try to promote more recruitment for individuals with disabilities and really trying to help the trades and others be open to having apprenticeships. Looking at, I know people would have to self-identify, but just making it broader so that people would have the opportunity, if so interested. And I think and I did miss so much of the presentation, so I have to look back at the recording. But I'm curious to know, there's so many different areas. Are we talking beyond trades, or is this more specific to trades?
I can't specifically speak for the Governor's Workforce Council or the Office of Workforce Strategy for that matter, but they are heavy topics of conversation. We have diversified outside of just the typical trade, construction, and manufacturing. We have apprenticeships in IT. We have them in insurance. We have them in registered nursing, now in CNAs, all sorts of various occupations. I've been in this role for 6 years, and the occupations, what they call out of the non-traditional roles of just manufacturing and construction, have been wildly developed. And as Representative Ackert had stated, our work, my staff and our agencies on behalf of the Commissioner and the State Apprenticeship Council has taken the deep dive into K-12 space to say it's okay to go into occupations, as career pathways have always been looked upon as lesser than and not equal to that of a college preparation course. It's time to have the conversation and culturally change that mindset. So that opens it up to everybody and not just specific sets of individuals. There are so many opportunities right now. For a lot of reasons, wish I was a 19-year-old individual. But that being said, the world is their oyster. There is no question about that, regardless if you do not have a college degree. So I thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. And I agree. I'm so happy that we're opening up this pathway and understanding the diverse needs of people to have different paths and to be successful. And I would really hope that we can report that information on disability as well, so we can track that as well. Thank you.
Daniel, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Todd's point about the industries. I kind of glossed over the occupational breakdown, but 55% of apprentices with disabilities, this is nationally, not in Connecticut, were in construction. So there's good representation there, but it's lower than nationally. 8.7% are in IT occupations, 9% are in installation, maintenance, repair, 7% are in production occupations, which is manufacturing. So all these occupations that we see in the registered apprenticeship system generally are well represented for apprentices with disabilities. And you also asked about strategies for recruitment. I focused on a lot of the support when apprentices were in the program, but our interview respondents reported that partnerships with VR agencies were real critical for bringing apprentices into the program. And I think that the points that Ariana hit about women in apprenticeship, about just getting information out, is real critical for apprentices with disability as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Representative Exum. Representative Case.
Thank you, and thank you to all the presenters. You know, being 15 years ago in Newington in a union shop, overseeing a group of floor layers, it was great to have the apprentices in the apprentice program. And a lot of contracts required apprentices, so it was really built heavy back then. And now being in the HVAC area, on the management side, you know, we're screaming for people, and we're a non-union, and we do have those training programs through SEMA and other groups within the state of Connecticut, and they're trying to get people to work. And it's really, you know, I know Tim's in the electrical industry, and we see that, but you know, young people, as Todd said, you know, these people are making up to 6 figures once they're actually finished their apprenticeship and they're off doing their journeymanship and they're entering into the business, and our businesses are able to train them through the apprenticeship program to work with that company that they're with. So I'm excited to keep pushing forward with the apprenticeship. I've always been a huge advocate for the disability population. You know, we need to get more disability people into the workforce, whether it's through an apprenticeship program, but you know, we always run into that subprime pay. We always run into different things that hold us up. And right now, there are so many slots out there for people to work. And you know, I see Rep. Ackert's hand there, and I just want to say, you know, we have a couple electrical businesses up here in the northwest corner that have just recently hired women out of apprenticeship programs, and they've been incredible, and we keep hearing that, and it's great to have. And boy, if they can push it even more in the high schools, that don't be afraid to get into the trades, because there is some serious a good living to be made throughout the trades, and you can do so much more with your life knowing a trade. I wish I knew a little bit about electrical, but I'll lean on Tim for that. But thank you everybody for coming today and giving us your piece. And it's great to have all this literature behind us so that we can fall back on it. And thanks, Rep. Farr.
Thanks, Representative Case. Representative Ackert, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So mine would be just if the committee would like, I would love to see Todd Burch's, what he has for registered, if you're allowed to provide that information of how many apprentices we have in the state of Connecticut, in which classifications are they, how do they identify, are they male, female, what, Hispanic, what makeup do we already have in Connecticut? Because we may be in a good place, but I don't know. And it'd be great to see the numbers and see where they are working and see where we can help fill the voids as needed, where we can focus our attention to. So it's up to the chair but I would love to see that number.
Yeah, no, that actually is a great follow-up question, because from previous numbers, Todd, I've received from you, there is a quite disparity in our state on apprenticeships when we look at underrepresented groups like women, people of color, particularly in trades. And it'd be great to get an update from you on overall what our apprenticeship programs look like, and particularly in these fields where we know we're going to see tremendous need, especially with this infrastructure dollars. What are really our numbers now, and what is your plan to kind of increase that diversity?
If I may quickly, definitely amenable to getting that information. Currently, just quickly, we have well over 1,500 employers, and at any given time, roughly 6,600 apprentices. The breakdown I will be able to forward, if you could please email me the specific questions that you're looking for. Be amenable to getting that data. That being said, that's a very easy fix. As far as forecast, again, as stated by the other folks that presented, our goals are quite clear. Everybody should have a great career, no matter who they are. There's no question about that. A fantastic opportunity. It's that the employer, again, this being an employer's voluntary program, the question then gets posed to the employers. What also are their goals to actually diversify their workforce? And we look forward to having those conversations with our partners, the American Job Centers, the workforce development boards, to assist employers in diversifying the workplace, as opposed to a government top-down goal. We want to work in concert with each other to get those that are underemployed into these fantastic careers and opportunities. So we look forward to that. But with regard to numbers and breakdowns, please send me an email and I can have those specifics forward to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. That's wonderfully helpful. I think kind of following up on what was asked a little bit about the pre-apprenticeship program that we have, could you give any more information at all around how that program is set up, what the opportunities are based on what you've seen from other states around the country, and how we can ensure, as you've known in this state, we've tried to do more to provide childcare and care for kids. How can that work into our pre-apprenticeship options moving forward?
Okay, so the pre-apprenticeship programs that have been developed through our office are just absolutely wildly fantastic. Again, I'm biased because we see the success. Everybody knows what an AP program is for high school students going to college. Pre-apprenticeship is the exact same model, except it's towards an occupation and not a degree. These individuals that are they're in pre-apprenticeship programs are either academic or a combination of academic and on-the-job learning through work-based learning type of initiatives. That being said, it prepares them to enter into an apprenticeship because they're getting a very, very vast education in what the actual occupation is. And the STEM education is fantastic. It actually correlates STEM education to what we used to call industrial arts, which has a fancy word called career technical education. So pre-apprenticeship on an academic level and also on the job training level prepares individuals regardless of age, high school, college. I have pre-apprentices that are in their 50s right now that are getting towards whatever the occupation's mindset is to enter into the registered apprenticeship as a full-time employee. So therefore, again, if you think in the pre-apprenticeship as an AP program, it's the exact same thing, but again, just occupationally driven. So I hope I answered your question on that.
Yeah, just kind of following up, I didn't hear anything about what we know about the childcare offering, and I know we've tried to expand the care for kids for those in workforce training, but how has that been working for you in regards to apprenticeships?
So that's kind of a separate issue. I mean, some of the speakers that stated before, especially in construction, construction starts very early in the morning. Again, being a former construction worker, I know that I had to be in Greenwich at 6:30 in the morning. How can you get childcare or a childcare center to open up at 4:30 in the morning? Very, very difficult conversation to have. That being said, there's no question about it. We have had these conversations with the Office of Early Childhood and how these can be different offerings. It's an issue. There's no question. It's not about how do we have childcare for apprentices. That's again an employer issue that we're trying to help address by having more centers either be able to open early, so on and so forth. If the organizations that offer childcare with the employers themselves hearing that, hey, we need you to open a little bit earlier so that these folks can get into jobs. I think that's the beginning of the conversations that we're having. So is there a problem with childcare, regardless if you're a single mother, single father, or not? Absolutely. Again, depending on especially second and third shift workers in manufacturing, very hard to get childcare for second and third shift workers. So that's an issue systemically across the board that a lot of us are trying to address and not just siloed.
Melissa, Ariane, do you want to comment on that as well? I'm sure from your experience.
Yeah, and I've actually learned from Ariane's work on this, so I'm going to keep my comments brief. 2 quick points on the Mississippi Community House Women in Childcare program, Women in Construction program that I highlighted. Something to remember about the success of that childcare in helping to improve their participation was also that they have a person dedicated to finding those childcare options who's housed within that program. And I think that providing the financial support as well as having that coordination support is just as important because like you said, Todd, finding those early morning childcare options and late in the evening childcare options is really tough. So having that one person dedicated for those pre-apprentices is super important. And then just to pick up on the data point, because it's so important, and I think that this gets to Representative Turco's question earlier, is we say a lot of times, especially when folks want to talk about expanding access to any workforce development program, to start with the data. And that can kind of be your roadmap in figuring out what things you want to double down on and where are your gaps in your holes. So completion rates, disaggregated data by gender, by race, et cetera. So I just want to say those 2 points.
Ariane, you had another comment?
Yeah, just very quickly, the Mississippi program is the kind of, the highlight because they're adequately funded, but also Oregon is interesting to look at because they use part of that money to fund somebody to work, and they link their Department of Human Services childcare provision with somebody to support the needs of childcare for apprentices. And I think a lot of the key is in-home daycare, and there's also really interesting initiative out of Massachusetts. It's a pilot program, but it's making those links and ensuring that both childcare providers and the people who need childcare get access to good jobs. So it's a kind of a linked up program, but happy to make connections to those if you're interested.
Thanks, Ariane. Representative Haynes.
Hi, I just wanted to add to the conversation. Last session, I put in some legislation that would give tax incentives to businesses that set up or pay for daycare. So that is something that we already do on other workforce programs, but we didn't do it for apprenticeships. So in regards to what you're talking about right now, I just thought I'd throw that out there, saying that we're going to try and throw that up there again and see if we can get some help in that arena. But it is what Ariane was talking about in regards to, and also Melissa talking about, what can we do to get these people in these positions? And for whatever reason, apprenticeships didn't have that whereas other workforce programs did. So hopefully we can get that going this year to help that out. Not at 4 in.the morning, but sometime.
Thanks, Representative Haynes. I am mindful we just have a few minutes before we wrap up. I do want to thank each of our speakers. I love the beauty of Zoom in this way because we have a chance to bring everyone together with such tremendous expertise on this issue of really expanding access to apprenticeships. And I also want to thank my colleagues for their time, as several of them noted. Today was a very busy day in Zoom world for many of us. But as we've heard, apprenticeship does have this proven track record of strong results for employers and workers. We know there are these high starting salaries, employment retention, also much look to completion rates, higher completion rates, especially amongst our union employers. And I just want to note, as we move forward, I was thrilled to see such great examples of how we can foster diversity and equity inclusion in these apprenticeships in our state. And I look forward, Todd, to your follow-up on where we stand right now and how I know as a committee we can support those efforts moving forward. So with that, I thank everyone for being here, for taking the time, and I look forward to, again, what we can do together as we expand access to these opportunities. So please be well.